Batman loves his family, and Shazam's family is falling apart. What kind of bizarre world do we live in? Hi, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything I talk about. This is your first and only warning that many spoilers lie ahead. Right now, we're taking a look at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on July 2nd, 2024, originally published June 4th, 2024. First of those is Shazam number 12. Now, I had really been losing interest in Shazam with Mark Waid's writing on it, which was from issue number 1 until, 2 or 3 issues ago when they started this new storyline, I think called Moving Day, and 12 is the finale of that, and I kind of skimmed the last few issues, just kind of seeing, is this going to get into a flavor that I really want? Because Mark Waid was certainly keeping things fairly whimsical and bringing in talking animals, which historically Captain Marvel, or Shazam as he's unfortunately known now, is really associated with. But I always felt like that didn't need to be a necessary part of Shazam. The whole talking animals, anthropomorphic animals, which I have hang-ups about, admittedly. I just associate it with I guess, classic Disney cartoons, and so it just seems silly and for children to have animals talking. But anyway, I always kind of thought, well, that's just a part of the era of comics where they were aimed more at children, right? Do we really, now that these comics are geared more toward, at the lowest age, I think, teens, and certainly more so for people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, do we really need to still doing the talking? Do we really still need to do the talking animals thing? And I guess some people feel like we do at DC. But this writer, Campbell's the last name, I believe, has had a lot less emphasis on the talking animals and has allowed the story to go to some more serious places, starting to explore some of the really heavy drama that can come with issues related to adoption and that whole process, and the heartache that often comes because of the background of those kids. I mean, the reason they're being adopted is because they lost parents, or they had parents that were really dysfunctional and abusive. I mean, so they're starting to let just a little bit of those kinds of realities come into this concept of the Shazam family all being foster kids that are, as of this story arc, entering into the adoption process with their would-be parents. And so there's really some potential for beauty there, but I was really hoping they would also lean into some of the difficulty that is just part of the backdrop of that whole life experience. And they did start doing it some, and really noteworthy in the way that they touched on it in this issue. Billy has a reunion with his biological mom, who's really more than that, because he does have plenty of memories living with her, but Child Protective Services at some point had to separate him from her because of just the really bad place that she was in. But when he is reunited with her now, he discovers for the first time that she has a young son. And so he's really processing and grieving over the fact that for some reason she couldn't get things together to be his mom, but has found a way to do it with this new son. And just in rage and grief, he says, if she can be a good mom for him, why couldn't she have been there for me? And he ultimately concludes that it's in some way his fault. He says, I'm clearly why my family fell apart, because mom was able to do it right without me. So I just really appreciate that they are allowing the story to go into this kind of territory, and it makes me wonder if this could become a book that I am very much invested in before too long. There's also a really interesting development that in part makes me wonder, okay, I don't think this is just a guest creative team. This might be a new creative team that they quietly replaced Mark Waid with, because there's some game-changing stuff going on here. In kind of like the world of magic or whatever, the Rock of Eternity or wherever they are, I think they're in the Rock of Eternity, Billy and Shazam, aka Captain Marvel, are able to converse with each other, and Shazam reveals to Billy, I am not you. And Billy's like, so what? I say the magic word and we switch places? And Shazam says, it's more complicated, but yes. And so there's not clarity on what's going on here. We're not really talking about two different people, that Shazam is like his own true person, but perhaps he's like a segmented part, a filtered, a modified part of Billy by the other kind of beings that are granting him power. Namely, he references the wisdom of Solomon at some point, which I think certainly someone having wisdom is going to at least make them come across as very different from the same person when they are foolish. So what all of this means is not clear to me, but it's interesting that they are putting a fresh coat of paint on this concept of what is the nature of Billy as he transforms into Shazam. Shazam says it's, after saying it's more complicated, it says, however, we can always see through each other's eyes, always know what's happening. So this really does seem, again, to lean in the direction of them being two separate persons. But what's the nuanced reality? I don't know. But there's been some stuff going on with Shazam, I keep wanting to call him Captain Marvel, that is giving like a dark vibe to him, making him seem like, okay, is he the antagonist? Is he actually a problem that needs to be solved? Because he's been keeping things from Billy, causing Billy to forget things. He does go so far as to say that, I started to think differently than you. I became my own person trying to protect you. But that is in the context of saying, hey, I am the one with the wisdom of Solomon. Now, how are we supposed to view this? Or in him saying something like that, is this Captain Marvel as kind of like the parent figure that doesn't understand kids and, would say that they know better than their children, and we're supposed to see him as like actually an adult that is not being understanding of their child? Or is it possible that like we're only supposed to feel that way initially and then realize, hey, there's stuff going on with Billy. Maybe Captain Marvel is the adult with wisdom that knows better in this case. Does that justify him taking Billy's memories away? That seems doubtful at this point, but the waters are muddied right now as far as how we're supposed to view this new understanding of who Shazam is. He does have kind of like a judgmental moment that I think is definitely supposed to be a stain on our view of his character, because Billy says, you don't think I'm worthy of the mantle that the wizard Shazam gave me, and Shazam says, no, because you're a child. And he's trying to protect him. So we are getting some of those kind of parental vibes here, but I don't think it's as simple as saying that he's just the bad grown-up. And one reason I say that is because there's a clearly sympathetic moment toward Shazam near the end of the issue where he says, to save Billy's family, to save Billy, there's nothing I won't do. Is that love, or is that just some kind of built-in commitment? I don't know. It muddies the waters also if this is Billy himself in some sense, then it's just self-preservation. It's not really something selfless. So I'm just curious as to get more details about the nature of these two persons. What I would like to see in the end is that there's a recognition of nuance, that, Billy is going through some heavy stuff, and he is young. He doesn't have the wisdom of an adult, let alone the wisdom of Solomon. And so there are some things that Billy is not seeing clearly. There are some things that he's wrong about. But I'm also content for Shazam to be wrong about some things. But at the end of the day, I think I would like them to validate the idea that, generally speaking, parents do know more than their kids. They do have more wisdom than their kids. That doesn't mean that they can't and don't make bad decisions, sometimes terrible ones. But on average, it's still important for children to listen to their parents, to take in their counsel, and if not trust it blindly, then give it weight and real consideration. Anyway, the issue ends with Billy possibly sacrificing himself in some sense. Clearly, he's not dead. Just on a meta level, that's obvious. But Mary, are they even calling her Mary Marvel anymore? But she says that Billy is gone, and then the little tease for the next issue says the Rock of Eternity is no longer attached to the Vasquez house. That's a big game changer. The day is saved, but at what cost? The adventure continues with issue 13, Where in the World is Billy Batson? So I really hope it's the same creative team, particularly the writer, that is going to be carrying the story on from here. I think there's potential for me to really re-engage with this comic and this character again. The only other comic that really grabbed my attention is Batman 148, which finally brings to an end this saga of Batman versus failsafe slash Batman of Zur-Anar, who, like that, is a psychological partition of Bruce's mind that got copied into this failsafe body based on Amazo technology. So like a crazy, imposing foe that would seemingly be unbeatable if it's Amazo with Batman's brain, you know? So how do they bring this to an end? Is it a satisfying conclusion? I mean, yes and no in some ways. The main kind of resolution to Batman's character development story arc is that he acknowledges to his, Bat family that it's his fault what has happened here. He says, it may have been my hubris from when I was a younger man, but the responsibility is still mine. He also says that for so long he's been there, meaning Zur-Anar, this partitioned version of Batman that was meant to protect him from psychological attack or mind control and stuff like that, was meant to kick in and take over if his mind was compromised. But it was a Batman-only version of Bruce's mind. And what he kind of realizes here is that for so long, Zur-Anar has been there in the background, pushing me into the darkness, away from the people I love. But I need you all, not just for my mission. You're my family. You give me hope when the darkness creeps in. And he apologizes to Jason. So there's kind of like some healing happening here. And I think from a story arc perspective, I like this kind of moment. But I think it needs to remain a cycle long term that Batman goes back and forth into recognizing his need for family, but then his obsession and his mission eventually getting the better of him and taking priority over family and relationships. I think that Batman ultimately works best, for me certainly, as a tragic character and a cautionary tale. If he is healed mentally, emotionally, he's not Batman anymore. If he has great relationships and a healthy family, he can't function as Batman from a conceptual standpoint, And I think honestly, it's his hurt, the freshness of those wounds that are revived. I think canonically, whenever he sleeps, he goes back to that dream about his parents. So I feel like that's refreshed every night in his mind. And so how can he fully heal if that's what's going on? And I think that's important. Nevertheless, I do still like this moment because it communicates to us as readers, we can't be Lone Rangers in life. We need family. We need to be accountable to others, to family members. That's an important part of our life as Christians as well, with our church family, with our brothers and sisters, that we have relationship and that we have accountability there. As much as we as geeks would love to be Lone Rangers, I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, yes, so many times I would love to be. We need that accountability. We need those relationships. And so I do really appreciate and value a moment like this, as long as Batman doesn't stay healed for too long. And while we're getting philosophical, as he's talking to Jason Todd, who really became the victim of Zur-Anar when Zur-Anar took over Bruce, he apologizes to him and just can't even come up with the words to apologize for what happened and what he did to him. He basically kidnapped him, was really arguably torturing him. It was pretty dark. But Jason says, hey, it's okay, Bruce. None of us can change the past. God knows I have things I've done I'd like to erase. But we atone. We work on ourselves. We move forward. And so this is where it gets a little bit philosophical and once again just brings to the surface the general default position on redemption, on atonement that you're going to see in comics. It's a very humanist kind of idea that we atone and that we atone somehow for ourselves. Now, if we look at the Webster's definition for atone, it says to make amends, to provide or serve as reparation or compensation for something bad or unwelcome. So if we're looking at atonement as the idea of, well, we're trying to heal the damage that was done, then there is a degree of atonement that we can bring about. But if we're talking about compensating for, like making up for, we can't really do that. because whatever good deed we would think to ourselves we can do to make up for something bad that we did, we should have been doing that good deed anyway. We should be living selflessly to the utmost degree. That is how we ought to live, despite the fact that we, of course, certainly don't. So the idea that someone can atone for themselves in the sense of making up for the wrongs that they have committed really kind of assumes that at a baseline, we only need to be this certain casual amount of good. And we can make up for our wrongs by really putting our all into being good. But I mean, shouldn't we always be putting our all into being good? I think we let ourselves off the hook because we just like, oh, well, who does that? Nobody does that. We're just comparing ourselves to other people. But as Christians, we know that the comparison is not to other people. That's where we get into problems, comparing ourselves to other people. That's where we get stuck in ruts of sin and create a relational separation between us and God because we're not willing to really let Him peel back the layers of our hearts and show us how much further we really have to go. And from a humanist perspective, I think that's just too discouraging because there's not the redemption provided by Christ, the forgiveness and grace provided by Christ being factored into that. And so I think from a more secular humanist naturalist standpoint, what we're going to tend to see is this like removal of the necessity to really be moral to our utmost ability every moment. We're not held accountable to that standard. And even, of course, our utmost ability of living moral lives is not going to touch what Jesus lived out. Anyway, admittedly, I'm being a little bit of a nitpick, maybe making a mountain out of a molehill here, but it was a point that stood out to me, and I think it's always worth coming back to because we hear the language of atonement and redemption very often in comic books. And so it's important to refresh our minds in the distinction between the secular idea of atonement and redemption and what the Bible actually teaches about the nature of atonement, redemption, and how those things are actually possible. Well, the way they defeat Failsafe / Zur-Anar is really pretty clever. Jason basically has to die, and they create a plan where he can be revived by, like, I don't know, is a Lazarus pill or something, like a little bit of Deus Ex Machina going on there. But there's still a sense of risk, a sense of sacrifice, so I'm willing to accept it. And in part just because of the idea is pretty clever. They are not able to defeat Failsafe, Zur-Anar, by outsmarting him per se, but rather by taking advantage of a failsafe built into Failsafe. Namely that if Failsafe as Batman ever kills, then there is a prime directive basically to shut him down. Because at the end of the day, Batman is still not about killing. And so when the Batman of Zur-Anar created Failsafe, even that was still a priority. So when Jason clearly appears to die, then Failsafe shuts down and is defeated. It's a cool moment. Now, you would think that Failsafe would maybe kind of confirm. I mean, he's just freshly dead. Has anybody tried CPR yet? But I mean, we can kind of cut those parts and maybe assume that kind of stuff would happen. I mean, you don't need to overthink it every single time. The idea is clever. I'm willing to roll with it. The fact that it doesn't ultimately cost them much because of Jason's ability to revive himself. I mean, there is still risk, and so and Batman, I think, is genuinely concerned and, in a sense, grieving the possibility that Jason has just died here, or that he's certainly risking it. So I think I'm feeling that moment the way I'm supposed to feel it. So yeah, at the end of the day, it is a satisfying ending, even if there's some nits I could pick. However, the defeat of this Daniel something guy, I think his name is, who trained Batman very early in his career to partition his mind, he ultimately becomes kind of like the last villain that needs defeating here. And I think his defeat happens a little too easily, because he says something weird, Vespertilio Expergiscimini. I guess he's spent some time at Hogwarts. And then Batman starts, wigging out and clutching at his head, And Daniel says, a little gift implanted all those years ago when you were under my spell. I gave the Joker a phrase to stop you. Did you really think I wouldn't have one all to myself? And then he starts beating the crap out of him. But then he notices that Bruce is laughing, and he's like, what's going on? Well, at this point, it hasn't been revealed yet that Jason is not dead. And so Jason, we have a flashback that kind of shows us that story, and then we come back to the reveal that Jason is just fine and definitely bloodied, but he's back in the game, and the other Bat children, Nightwing and stuff, the couple of Robins, they're there as well, and Nightwing punches out Daniel. Okay, well, I guess if you knock him out, that's a temporary fix. But whoa, a few minutes later, Daniel's woken up, and he's like, this is nothing, a blip. You think you've stopped the storm, but I can see all the angles, Bruce, blah, blah, blah. He's monologuing here. I'm like, why not say the Versprigili Italian food thing or whatever to get to take over Batman again or whatever. I mean, maybe he knows that like that is only good for shutting him down. But even so, if they don't kill this guy and this guy gets out again, he's got the phrase. We got to deprogram Batman big time at this point. Certainly to deal with that, but also I think to deal with Zur-En-Arrh potentially coming back, unless we have this weird concept where they really are putting forth that Zur-En-Arrh left Batman's brain. But that doesn't work for me. I guess I'd have to go back and see if at the same time that Zur-En-Arrh was uploaded, which is really just copied into the failsafe body, did Bruce at that time also completely delete Zur-En-Arrh from his mind? I don't remember. I'd have to look again. I don't remember that being the case. But they're treating it as an upload where basically it was deleted while it was uploaded. I mean, I got into all this mess before, but this is why the whole idea of transcendence, us uploading our consciousness, transferring our consciousness into machine bodies, is not a viable concept, because we don't really change location of data when we're doing that on computers. We copy it in a new location and delete it in the existing location. Nothing is actually moving from one place to another, and so why do we use that metaphor and think that gives us hope to move our consciousness into a new body? So likewise, because I don't clearly remember a Zur-En-Arrh was erased from my mind moment, apart from the upload language, which isn't really clear, I think Batman needs to get checked out. I mean, of course, Batman needs to get checked out. From day one, he's needed to get checked out. But we definitely got to deal with the Zur-En-Arrh thing. But this is the end of this story arc. It says end at the very bottom of the last page, and we get a splash page of the Bat family, really just the male parts of the Robins, the various Robins. They're back together again. It's a triumphant note. But, things are not completely resolved, so where will things go next? Batman still has a robotic hand, let's not forget, and I feel like that's something that has got to be fixed at some point before this whole writer arc, however long this creative team is on this book, before they leave. We got to deal with the robotic hand. I cannot have a Batman with a robotic hand. Anyway, ring selection for this week is the Blue Ring of Hope, mainly because of Shazam. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit more hopeful. Like, okay, finally a lot of these threads are being tied up in Batman. It was getting really complicated for a while, so I'm looking forward to see what comes next there. But Shazam, I was like full-on uninterested in this book, and now this new creative team has been pulling me slowly back into a place of interest in Shazam, and so I am hopeful that that this will continue with whatever comes next as we figure out what's up with Billy Batson and maybe get some more clarity on the new status quo, the new revelation of the nature of Shazam and Billy Batson, and whether or not they're two different persons. I mean, there's so much, I think. The main thing, even above and beyond that, is the willingness to go to some weighty places. Yes, there's still some talking animals, but I'm like, those have been pretty minimized. These other things have been brought to the front, which are much more engaging to me. So yes, I am hopeful about the future of Shazam at this point, but of course we'll see what happens. And I think those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, I would love to get your thoughts about these comics or maybe some others that came out that I didn't talk about. You can leave your comments and reactions below. As always, also, I hope you'll check out christiangeekcentral.com. Tons of content made for you there as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.